Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Neoliberal Round podcast. I am Ronaldo McKenzie. Today, we have an update from the mouth of Mr. John Anthony Castro, who is running for the US 2024 presidential candidate. We've been following him. We've been following his story. We interviewed him for about an hour and a half some time ago. And he sent us a video, and it's also available on his Twitter page, explaining this suit, which he actually finally filed on July 25th. In DC, Anthony Castro, filed a suit against the FEC and against Donald Trump, saying that Donald Trump is ineligible to be on the ballot in 2024. And because of his involvement in January 6th insurrection. And John Castro will tell you that he stakes his candidacy on this particular issue. We've been following Mr. Castro. We've been interviewing Mr. Castro, who is a 2024 presidential candidate, who currently resides in Dallas, and he is the founder and president of AI Tax, which is a company that was just valued at $180 million. But he is a Republican, and he is taking on a fellow Republican. And we know recently that Liz Cheney lost her seat because she opposed and she criticized Donald Trump. Will this go down very well with other Republicans? Will John Castro feel well? Because anyone that goes up against Donald Trump loses. So will this particular suit amount to anything? But you will hear. But what we're going to do in this episode, the first 10 minutes, is a video that he had submitted via his Twitter page, and he submitted it to us, explaining why he is filing this suit and how confident he is. And he says that even if this particular suit is thrown out or they do not win, what will happen is that it provides a learning opportunity for them, a blueprint as to what to do in 2023. So it's not a win-lose, it's a win-win for them, even if they lose in a sense, because this is also a learning opportunity. But so the first part is 10 minutes of a video that he submitted explaining the suit and why the suit. And then the second part of the video is a bonus video. It's a 1.5 hour interview that we did with Mr. Castro, and we have it here. We talked about his life, talked about why he's running, talked about where he's coming from humble beginnings to what he's doing now. So if you want to get into who he is, and we did a podcast already, but it was an audio podcast, but we now have it available, the full video interview on this show with Mr. Castro. So the first 10 minutes is a video that he submitted talking, it's a press, in a sense, a release that he submitted talking about this particular filing. And then the next particular segment of this show is the 1.5 hour interview that I did with Mr. Castro via Zoom for this show. So you'll get to hear that, which is a bonus or a rerun, but it was never, I don't think you guys had an opportunity to see the live video. We have the video here for you today. So thank you for listening to and for watching the Neoliberal Round podcast. And I hope that you continue to share the show with your friends, subscribe, send us a feedback, and donate at https anchor.fm/the neoliberal/support. Thank you for supporting us. And the next segment, you will hear John Castro. And then after that, John Castro talking about the July 25th suit. And then after that, we will carry the bonus video interview that we did some time ago, about an hour and a half, where I interviewed him about his life, about his career, about his dreams, about his futures, about his passions, and about his goals to be the next US president. Thank you for listening. We'll be right back after this.
This past Monday, I filed this case in Washington, D.C. before the United States District Court for the District of Columbia. You'll see it right here, John Anthony Castro. That's a business address, so I'm not concerned. Versus the Federal Election Commission. You'll see the case, I'm trying to look at the camera, right here. It's case number 1:2-CV-02176, jury demand. The judge assigned to the case was Rudolph Contreras, and It's a jury demand case. So what is this case? What does it mean? Why do I think it's going to be successful? Who the hell is this guy anyways? And it's all that. So that's what this video is all about. Kind of want to give you some background. So first, my name is John Anthony Castro. I have been an anti-Trump Republican pretty much since Trump announced that he was going to run for the presidency. I, like a lot of people, were completely blindsided when he actually won the election, and spent most of 2017 wondering what I was going to try to do about it. And at that time, I had a tax law firm, Castro and Company, that had really just taken off. And it was quite unexpected, but it was generating several $1 million a year, my tax law practice. And I'll just be honest, I was a little bit scared about kind of messing up a good thing. You know, I was like, do I come out against him? And then, you know, what happens if people don't like that and they don't come to my firm anymore? And, you know, there's all those considerations. And, you know, I went through a period of self-indulgence, and, you know, I don't want to say these things right now, right? You know, that way I get them out, and you know, people won't use it against me later to judge me. But I did buy like a Ferrari, and, you know, I bought a lot of nice clothing, and, you know, Rolex watch, and, you know, all that stuff. You know, I was born into a poor family. So all of a sudden, making it and having a very successful firm generating millions of dollars, totally unexpected. But it was in 2017 when I was like, something has to be done about this, especially with the Charlottesville and all that stuff. I was like, no, I can't stay by idly quiet. And I became part of a group. Actually, I started a group. And, you know, I coined it after the French Resistance movement. And we got very active with Roy Moore in Alabama. And I probably spent north of $150,000 of my own money to stop Roy Moore in Alabama. And when we were successful, I think it was that point when it really got to our head that, wow, like if we can flip Alabama, there's nothing that's off the table. Not even Georgia, which obviously we saw how that went 2 years later in 2020. So that being said, that's who I am. In 2020, I ran for U.S. Senate against John Cornyn in the state of Texas. I ran on the Republican ticket. I tried to stick to the issues, you know, because of all the culture war BS and all that. I was really trying to stick to the issues, and I was really trying to show people what true conservatism is about. Limited government in the sense that we don't care if you're LGBTQ. We don't care if you want to marry somebody of the same gender. We don't care if your doctor prescribes you THC. You know what I mean? Like small, limited federal government, period. Stay out of our personal lives. And that's basically goes back to Barry Goldwater conservatism. Sorry, I had a low battery notice. I had to clear the screen. That all goes back to Barry Goldwater, Conscience of a Conservative, you know, from the early 1960s. Only true conservatives actually know that, because again, like I've actually studied conservative political philosophy. But that being said, you know, I ended up linking up with the Lincoln Project and other like-minded people to get really involved after the whole Roy Moore victory. And in 2020, I probably spent north of $250,000 of my own money to make sure. And my states that I focused on was Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. My personal analysis and conclusion was that if Trump didn't carry those states, that there was no way he could win the presidency. And then even there on a more granular level, we focused on the counties that were flippable, and even within those counties, the neighborhoods that were kind of like the swing neighborhoods. So that being said, a lot of background, a lot of history in the anti-Trump movement. In 2021, it was my district, Texas Congressional District 6, that the sitting congressman passed away from COVID. And his name was Ron Wright. And his wife decided, Susan Wright, she decided to run, and several other people. It was a really crowded field of around 20 people. And I ran as well. And I probably spent north of about $500,000-$600,000 of my own money. But much to everyone's surprise, I performed a lot better than everybody thought. It was still only like 5% of the vote, but again, considering there was like, a crap ton of candidates, did fairly well. And I, to be honest, kind of felt a little bit guilty because I was still afraid at that time to come out against Trump. Michael Wood was known as the anti-Trump candidate in that race. He got a ton of free media coverage. But as you can imagine, Texas Republican being anti-Trump, he got like 1% of the vote. 1% of the vote, and mind you, he came out on CNN, NBC, Newsweek, all this media coverage, like tons of free media coverage, and still could only pull 1.5% of the vote. I pulled about 5.5% of the vote. In fact, if you combined Michael Wood with, 3 other hardcore Trumpers, one was even in his administration, I actually performed better than all 3 of them combined. So, but still, it showed the power of Trump. And when Trump turned around and endorsed Susan Wright, you knew that anybody that knew me knew that that was not going to happen. And we made sure that Susan Wright did not win. Jake Elsley won. So that being said, that's kind of like my anti-Trump bona fides, trying to prove to you everything that I've been doing behind the scenes as part of the resistance. So that brings us all to this case. This case is trying to challenge Trump's eligibility to be on the 2024 ballot as a presidential candidate. So how are we accomplishing that? How am I accomplishing that? I decided to register with the Federal Election Commission as a presidential candidate, and I publicly announced my candidacy in November of last year. And I made it a point, actually a little bit way earlier than that, but I made it official on Twitter with a public pronouncement in November. But basically, by registering to be a presidential candidate, I have what's called federal judicial standing to bring a cause of action challenging Trump's candidacy. Because the legal theory is that by him being on the ballot, it creates a competitive injury on me. So, but all the election law nerds came out and they basically started telling me like, oh, John, you can't try to declare Trump a candidate because there are these regulations called testing the waters that allows him to raise millions of dollars without having to be deemed a candidate. I call BS on that. I have 2 law degrees, by the way. My JD is from UNM, and my LLM, Master of Laws, is from Georgetown University Law Center in Washington, D.C. So I'm in the top 1% of attorneys that have 2 law degrees. And I've always loved constitutional law, and I studied it very, very deeply. That being said, I understand Section 3 of the 14th Amendment more than anybody. In fact, if you download a copy of this complaint, and I'm going to provide a copy of this on my campaign website, johncastro.com. Don't worry about going there yet. I'll post the link on Twitter. But this is basically like a freaking legal brief on Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. But the first thing we try to do is basically have the court declare Trump a candidate by basically saying he's raised more than $5,000 or allowed others to raise $5,000, so he's a candidate. And then step number 2 is going straight for the jugular. And it's basically saying that the FEC's acceptance of Trump's Form 2 statement of candidacy is tantamount to unlawful state action, acknowledging, at least implicitly, his eligibility and or qualification to pursue and or hold public office in violation of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. So this is the first attempt. All the constitutional law professors said, like, no, John, you need to wait until next year when you're both on the ballot in New Hampshire, then bring this case. I don't want to wait. I want to at least, if I swing and miss, at least it'll give an opportunity for the federal judiciary to give us some judicial feedback on this and maybe provide some more definitive guidance and maybe even provide us with a blueprint on what we need to do. But I can have a ruling on this case before the end of 2022, and then that gives us, again, a blueprint of what we need to do in 2023 to make sure we get Trump kicked off the ballot in all the key swing states. So thank you for watching, and we'll see how it goes. I'll be posting updates.
Good morning. Hi.
Hey, good morning, Ronaldo.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Sorry, I had some trouble getting this set up. Give me one moment.
Yes, and that is fine. I completely understand. I had some connection problems myself. It's good to have you on.
Yeah, good to have you too.
Yes, it's great to have you. Let me begin officially. Good morning. I am Ronaldo McKenzie, and welcome to another episode of the Neoliberal Round podcast. And finally, we have with us Mr. John Anthony Castro, the US 2024 presidential candidate. Good morning, John, and welcome again to the show. And we are so delighted to have you.
Thank you. Thank you.
How was the weekend for you? A very busy weekend?
Oh, no, actually, very relaxing weekend.
That is good. That's good. So, who is John Castro? Who is John Anthony Castro? And I actually visited your page and saw that you were born in. I will not try and pronounce that the city.
Kaiserslautern. Yeah.
What's it called?
Well, sorry, Landstuhl is what's on my birth certificate. But
Oh, okay. And tell me, do you have do you speak some German?
very, very, very little, like very rudimentary, elementary.
Okay, good. And so first of all, tell me, what was life like growing up in Germany?
Very different. We didn't have television on a regular. And yeah, that is something that's very unique about my life. The first 10 years of my life was in Germany.
Playing from home theater.
And yeah, whenever we wanted to, like, we had an aunt back home in Mississippi that would record television shows like The Simpsons and Living Color and stuff like that, Saturday Night Live. And then she would put it all in a VHS cassette and then mail it to us in Germany. And then we would watch the same episodes like 1,000 times. But
wow.
it was mostly playing outside at the playground. That's actually where I learned German.
Yes.
I didn't find out until much later in my life from my mother and my father that I apparently spoke fluent German when I was a child. And they said, you just picked it up on the playground, just playing with all the other German kids. And so, yeah, it was pretty interesting. But I was there because my father was stationed in the military. And so,
Yes.
yeah, first 10 years of my life was out there in Germany.
Yes. Okay, that's nice. And so the first 10 years of your life, and so you went to school in Germany, and any problems in adjusting when you?
No. I mean, when I came back, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, the customs were a little bit different. You know, everybody over there, at least in the town that we were in, they were very, very warm, very friendly. You know, so we would always hug each other,
Yes.
give each other a kiss on the cheek whenever we saw each other. And I remember I got in trouble in elementary school when I came back and I did that. And they were just
Wow.
oh yeah, you don't do that here.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was pretty funny. I had to kind of adjust that. Yeah, because I mean, in Europe, you know, it's just everybody's a little bit more warm. But
Yes.
but yeah, it didn't take too long though.
And I saw that you worked at Pizza Hut. I did some research, and I wanted to know more about you. So I did some research, and I saw that you worked at Pizza Hut for 2 years.
Yeah.
Many people while you were in high school. And let me tell you, I have been talking about the interview with you with many different people, and there was a Stop the Violence march here in Philadelphia over the weekend, and I got an opportunity to meet several hundred people, interview them, and many of the young people had questions for you. Many of them have dreams, and one young lady, and I'm going to actually play some of the interviews so that you can hear it. One young lady said she played and she wanted to be a musician, and she wanted to be a big musician, and she wanted to find out, how they can relate to you because you worked at Pizza Hut, but here you are. And actually, I wrote a question, and I'm going to tell you what I have. The question I have. I said, let me not assume. Your parents, where are your parents from? Were they born here in the U.S.?
Yeah, they're American. They're born here in the U.S.
They're American. Okay, great. So, but you have a name. It's Castro, and I'm Jamaican. I'm from Jamaica, and many people relate to we are familiar. So when people hear Castro, what comes to mind, and what do you have to people about that?
I'm sorry. What was the last question?
Yeah, the name Castro evokes a lot of name. Do you have to explain that to people sometimes?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because of course that's come up my whole life. I heard it a lot growing up as a child, and so naturally when you hear people make that direct reference to another person so many times, you're going to be curious, like, who is this person that shares my name? And so I actually did a lot of research
Yes.
On Cuban history, even though I'm Mexican American,
Right.
I did a lot of research on Cuban history, who Fidel Castro was, just because, again, like he would hear it at least once every 3 to 4 months from the age of 5 all the way to like 17, all throughout high school and everything. So, there's only so much before a person's going to be like, who is this person, and really want to understand, like, why does everybody know his name?
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, it's a name. I look at one thing that made me feel really happy was when Obama got elected. Because his name was Barack Hussein Obama, and we had literally gone to war with Saddam Hussein, in Iraq. And I know a lot of people thought like, oh, that's it. His name's too weird. It sounds like Osama and Hussein, and sounds like a terrorist and a dictator together. But to me, a name is just a name. It's my family name. At least in my lineage, a lot of people don't know this, but in Texas, there's actually a Castroville, so a city called Castroville in South San Antonio, and then an actual county named Castro County, and it roots back to an individual by the name of Henry Castro, who was actually one of the founders of the state of Texas. There were only the top 3 people that brought the most settlers to the state of Texas was Sam Houston, everybody knows his name, Stephen F. Austin, everybody knows his name, and Henry Castro. And what's funny is that, well, I mean, not funny, I think there's some hidden motivation behind it, but it seems that even though Henry Castro brought more settlers to the state of Texas than Stephen F. Austin is obviously more widely known. And I feel like, the contribution of the Castro family to the founding of the Republic of Texas is really possibly even intentionally downplayed. But yeah, the name actually has a lot of significance in the state of Texas that I think history has suppressed.
That's interesting. Thank you so much. And I do a blog as well. When I started the blog in 2010, but there's one of the things I've often said, and I've written about this. What is the ultimate of all things? The ultimate of all things is that we become one with reality, with all of our individuality. And then I said, a man once said, once you label me, you negate me. And that's Kierkegaard. And I actually was reading something you said, which was quite powerful and quite remarkable, which I wanted to ask you about. And you said, someone asked you some time ago, what do you believe are the core responsibilities for someone elected to this office? And you responded by saying, to always promote the interest of the nation over any ideology, individual, or interest group. And and how do you propose to do that? And how does that speak to you? And we live in a society that is becoming more divided than anything else. And how do you propose that we can do that?
Yeah, it's tough, especially in this hyper politicized environment. It's very difficult. I'm a very pragmatic person. I grew up poor. My family was poor. That was our background. I became a union organizer. I looked at the system and the way that it was structured, and I felt that there was a lot of, an inherent limitations and barriers put in place. I was able to overcome those, but I know that I'm the exception, not the norm.
Yes.
And so I always told myself, if I'm able to get out of this hole, I'm not just gonna, cut and run like everybody else. I want to build a ladder, and I want to help others as well. And I don't know what it is about human nature. A lot of times people they're like, hey, I went through it, you can go through it too. And I believe that perpetuating injustice is an injustice in and of itself. And it makes you, a passive participant, in the system. And I don't want to do that. I want to look back at the system and figure out how to fix it. As I got a lot older, I started seeing more and more, having more friends that were of a diverse political background, conservative Republicans, and I started seeing their world perspective and how some of their views made sense. I didn't agree with them all, but they made sense. And so I started becoming more well-rounded. And what I eventually realized is what really makes America great is that you get liberal ideas, you get conservative ideas, and you force them all into a building, that we call Congress, and you force them to hash it out. And what comes out of that is the best of both parties. But I think whenever there's one party rule, I think you're going to have disastrous consequences. Whether it's a far right state like Alabama, or whether it's a far left state like California. You're going to see when it's like one party is in power, you're going to have a lot of bad outcome because you're not getting a well-rounded view of the world and a well-rounded approach to solving problems. And so, there are again conservative policies that I agree with, and there are liberal policies that I agree with. When it comes to, I would say, foreign policy and economics, that's where I'm definitely on the conservative side. When it comes to social issues, I'm definitely more on the liberal side.
Okay.
And see, that's the part that a lot of conservatives are like, wait a minute, then if you agree with a liberal on anything, why are you running as a Republican? And it's just like, look, it's more from a libertarian angle.
Yeah.
And like there are even things that very few things that I agree with libertarians. But most importantly is the Fourth Amendment. I don't like government intrusion in any sense. And so when I see, conservatives being misled into being obsessed with the lives of LGBTQ individuals, to me, it's just like, leave them alone. You know what I mean? Like who cares? And then especially on the issue of abortion, they always ask me, are you pro-life or pro-choice? And I say, I support the right to choose life.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm trying to be a politician and like trying to play both sides. What I'm trying to say here is that it has to do again with personal liberty, individual liberty, individual responsibility. You make those choices. And even me as having grown up with a really strong Christian background, to me it's like, hey, we're not a theocracy. I don't want to impose my beliefs on other people. I think it's incumbent upon Christians to go out there and win the hearts and minds of people, get them to choose life. Don't try to do it through government mandate. That's not what Christendom is supposed to be about. So it's things like that. I take a very pragmatic approach to everything. I approach each issue just based on the facts and the data. And whatever works is going to work. And it's funny because, even though I get labeled a rhino as a result of that, rhino being Republican in name only, a lot of people don't seem to realize that's exactly what Reagan was. Reagan and a lot of my beliefs, except with economics, because I think he was horrible with economics, but a lot of his beliefs and mine we're about like 99% aligned on all the political stuff, except on some of the economics, like trickle down economics. It was a good theory at that time. They tested it out, turned out to not be good. That's the only thing that I think Reagan and I would really divert on. But a lot of people don't know the earned income tax credit, which people have labeled the most socialist tax policy that grabs wealth from the upper class and gives it to the lower class. They don't realize that was engineered by the Reagan administration. I mean, think about that for a second. The thing that now people attack as one of the most socialist tax policies in the Internal Revenue Code was actually designed by Reagan. And of course, he did it more from the corporate socialism standpoint. Effectively subsidize low wages, and put that on the government's credit card rather than on Wall Street and the publicly traded companies that could afford it. But again,
I wanted, sorry to
go ahead. Sorry.
I think I was some time ago. I was reading an article in the Atlantic from David French, who said that the Republican Party is changing. It's no longer that party of individualism and free speech and so on and so forth with some of the bills that's going on. And one of the things I've said is based on the context of the situations of the day and based on your ability to exact and to extend power, so on and so forth. But here you are saying that, and you're speaking to the issue. You believe that the earned income credit which is something that Reagan would is a social policy that somebody like Reagan would have promoted. And it's not necessarily so. Although you are Republican, you also promote certain ideals. And you said something about being poor, your experience of being poor. And does that affect some of your policies, some of your ideas? You seem very interdisciplinary, because I was looking and I said to myself, you said on your website You said you were born into a working class family, which is very important. And I just want to tell everybody who, if you're listening to the program, and Mr. Castro has over 39,000 followers on Twitter. I have about 200. Mr. Castro reached out to me, and I was very moved by that. But I can relate. So here you are, and you said you are trying to provide opportunity, and this is a great. This speaks volume to me as an individual. The fact that you are trying to connect with individuals as a way to promote other initiatives. But you said, I want to own in on the issue of you were born into a working class family, and you said you were poor. And I was going to ask you a question earlier, and I didn't get a chance to ask you the question. I said, here you are, Mexican American. After college, you had $325,000 in debt. At 44, you are able to have a net worth of over, I looked it up, of over 20 million, and a successful businessman. How are you able to accomplish this feat? And it's quite remarkable.
Yeah, it's a lot. I used to downplay it out of modesty and say that, I've been lucky a lot. I still do think that I was lucky. I think there were a lot of times growing up, I could have ended up arrested. I could have ended up in jail. Just that's the I guess the side effect of growing up in the poor neighborhoods. So I would clarify that we were born into a poor family.
Yes,
through my father's hard work, 20 years in the Army, and then after that, working for U.S. Customs and Border Protection, and then having 2 retirement pensions. We were able to live more of a working class standard. But all of my family, all of them, have we come from a poverty background. There's no question of it. And so I know the struggles. I know the hurdles that are faced. I know that sometimes you can't pick and choose who your friends are. I didn't get to choose who I lived next door to, and some of the troublemakers that I befriended growing up. And thankfully, there were times where I wasn't with them, where they did something foolish and ended up in jail. And to this day, I'm thinking, wow, if I had decided to go with them that day, my whole life would have possibly been derailed. And how many other people out there are like me that could have had a successful company, that could be running for office, but made one mistake growing up, and now their whole life is derailed as a result of it. And so it's pretty scary thinking about things like that. But as far as what I did, I just I kept getting student loans, I kept studying, I kept getting more degrees, and I kept just hoping that this is all going to pay off.
Yes.
And I know that unfortunately and sadly, a lot of people have done the exact same thing as me and not been as lucky, have not been as fortunate. And that's the reason that I'm not quick to say, like most people would, like, oh, well, I did it, you can do it too. I feel like that's a myth that the system creates, to basically use somebody like me as a poster boy to say that, oh, look, he did it through hard work and he was able to pay off all his $305,000 student loans in 4 years. Like, let's be honest, like that's 1 in a million, if not 1 in a billion chance that would happen. And it happened to me. And again, I'm not going to pretend that is something that's easily replicable. Right. So, that being said, that's why I want to look back at some of the hurdles that people face and try to find ways to correct it. One solution idea that I had was to give a dollar for dollar tax credit for all the principal paid back on student loans, not just the interest. And let's be honest, the student loan interest deduction is crap. It's a small, it reduces your tax bill by a few $100. What the hell is that?
Right.
And so I would say dollar for dollar, not only interest, but also the principal amount. So the way I view it is tax-free until debt-free. So as long as you're paying back your student loans, you shouldn't be paying into the tax system yet. And I feel like that would incentivize people to be like, oh, okay, cool. I can pay off my student loans now instead of paying my $5,000 tax bill. And I feel like that's also a way of it would incentivize people to go out there, start a business and try to make it work and at least be alleviated from these burdensome monthly payments. Like when Obama passed the income-based repayment plan, that was a godsend for me.
It was.
I was able to get my bills down to practically nothing. And I feel like that's what actually helped me start my business. If I had been crippled with these monthly payments, I would have never started Castro and Company, which you became a very successful international tax law firm. And I would have never been able to invent AI tax, which, well, interestingly, it was just valued last week at 180 million. So,
right. And I wanted to ask you some questions about AI tax, because you're a successful business, and you said it was just valued at how much?
180 million. Trust me, that floored me too.
Well, congratulations. And what is AI tax? What's that business about? Tell us a little bit about it.
So I had been working on this for the last 2 years. Here at the office, we called it the Manhattan Project because it was really secret. We didn't talk about it with anybody. And unfortunately, as a result of being very secretive, a lot of people thought that we were doing something nefarious. But in November of 2021, last year, I ended up getting awarded a 12-in-1 patent. So it's a patent covering 12 concepts from the US Patent and Trademark Office, and it covers artificial intelligence in the use of tax planning, tax legal defense, and tax preparation. So basically, it's like TurboTax on steroids. It's going to help you through every aspect of your tax return. If you have questions about, oh, do I qualify for this deduction? It'll actually thoroughly vet you for any particular legal position. If you have a question about, like right now when you do your taxes, for example, it says, oh, list your dependents. But what if you have a question of like, well, I took care of my niece or my nephew for a few months, like,
right,
am I allowed to claim that person? Unfortunately, right now you're at the mercy of Google, right? You have to do a bunch of Google searches and you're there for like 2 hours and then you're stressing whether you're right or not, because you'll find 10 different answers to the same question online. Our software will actually guide you through a Q&A process that gives you a legal conclusion as to whether you can claim that person. And so that's kind of like the opening part of the software, but it goes more.
Yes.
So it'll even vet you for like treaty positions and stuff like that. So basically it grabbed all the knowledge that I got in the LLM program at Georgetown and put it into software code. So.
Oh, nice. So not only were you studying the theory and the principles, and the concepts of law, and what kind of attorney are you? Tax attorney?
International tax, yeah.
International tax, but because you're young, you use the technology at your disposal.
Yeah.
Okay. And, now, my next question, I looked at some of your plans and some of your proposals, and as I said, as I was reading your platform, I couldn't tell if you were Democrat or Republican. And I said, I deliberately am not going to ask if you're Republican or Democrat, because to be honest, that is not important right now. And I actually spoke with several individuals who are aware that I'm interviewing you. One young man was asking, oh, is he Republican or Democrat? I said, no, that's not important, man. You have to listen to the platform and what you're promoting. One of the things recently, there was something about student loan, and where Biden is saying that he's considering canceling or forgiving student loan debt. And there are Republicans such as Fuel who is saying that, no, individuals and people, the economy is recovering now, but of course, I don't know if that is true. If the economy is recovering, because the economist is suggesting it indicated that
we're about to go into a recession. Yeah.
Yes, but yet he's saying that we shouldn't continue to families shouldn't continue to bear the burden of taxpayers shouldn't bear the burden of these students. But you released a statement saying I worked my ass off, but I'm the norm, and you just alluded to that, and you said something about debt enslavement. And what was it that you said? Something, I think I made a note of it.
Exactly how a lot of people in my prior position feel. It's when you're struggling month by month trying to earn enough to pay off your student loan, it does feel like debt enslavement. And
yes.
A lot of people will immediately, on my side of the aisle, will immediately say, well, it's their choice. They went to college, and it's kind of like, it's a bit insensitive to just like dismiss fellow Americans right away. Colleges don't prepare you. If you had parents like mine that didn't go to college, you don't have anybody advising you going in. And they're like, oh, well, that's why at the college they have these advisors. Anybody that actually went to college is going to laugh at that suggestion right away, right? Because you try to meet with these advisors, and they literally have a boilerplate statement that they just read every student, and you're just kind of like, okay, thanks, that didn't really help anything. they don't give enough information on careers going into it. They don't tell you what the salary expectation in this particular field is. They don't help you get a job afterwards. Some do, but not all of them, and especially not the ones in question, that were very predatory. Where it was just literally a degree mill. And a degree mill, for those that don't know, is an institution that basically just promises that you sign up and pay the tuition, you're going to get your degree, right? And then your degree is going to open up all these doors to all these opportunities. But you don't realize that, in the real world, people already know that university is just a degree mill. So they don't really give that degree any real weight. And so you end up spending all this money to get this degree. And then, it turns out that it's not really worth the paper it's printed on. And in the business world, any contract where anybody fraudulently induces you into a contract is a voidable contract. That's like contract 101. You can't fraudulently induce and deceive people into a contract. Yet that's exactly what happened to a lot of these students. And so it's not a question of like, oh, should we just embrace a liberal policy of canceling student debt? It's no, should we enforce basic contract law, which is that they were fraudulently induced into getting this degree that's practically worthless. And unfortunately, that's Democrats aren't the best at messaging sometimes. And I think it's because they're trying to express what the motivation is from their heart. And Republicans, I see a lot of times are very motivated out of logic. It's just like, well, to me, that's not logical. You chose this product, and therefore you have to pay for this product. And I wish that Democrats would approach situations from more of a very legal and analytical and logical standpoint. Like, we understand that everybody's motivated, out of their heart, but I think if they messaged it better, they would be able to reach people on the other side. And again, I think there have been presidents like that on both sides. Clinton was really good at that, and that's why he got reelected twice. I think so was Obama. And on the right, Reagan. That's why there was a Reagan Democrats. Reagan always was able to explain that, look, conservative policy isn't always just about analytics, data, and logic. Like, we have a heart too. And he was always trying to find that middle ground, and that's why he found that middle ground, like with the earned income tax credit, expansion of various social programs. And he saw it as like, hey, this kind of benefits Wall Street, right? Because it's going to subsidize some of the low wages paid by Walmart, and all these companies. And so it even got Walmart, even got Wall Street support, for a lot of these policies, because he was able to find that middle ground. And I really think that, that's what this country is missing again, is somebody that can be that voice of bipartisanship to try to bring both sides together and actually get things done. Because if not, we're always going to be in this stalemate if we keep electing these extreme ideologues. At the end of the day, everything, of course, is going to have a little bit of a conservative twist. I'm trying to reduce the federal deficit, pay down our enormous freaking debt, and but yeah.
And I saw that you said that you said you're trying to reduce the federal deficit, but at the same time you also believe that government have a responsibility to improve social services. And how can we do both? How can we improve social services while at the same time reduce federal debt?
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that. I'm really glad you asked that, because when people saw my firm taking off, it started turning heads. They were wondering, how is this? Because I graduated in 2013, and within 3-4 years, my firm was netting over $1 million a year, and that turned heads real fast, real fast. Within a few years, I was interviewing people from Georgetown. I had just graduated a few years prior, and it's very. I was able to do this because I fully leveraged technology. At the end of the day, that's all it was. I digitized marketing, whereas everybody before, international tax attorneys, would fly to countries, put on these presentations at the Ritz-Carlton or the Hilton, and have all this overhead. And to me, I always was trying to find a way how to do things on the lean, how to do things more efficiently, more effectively. And I was able to spend less and generate more. And that was not the prevailing wisdom at the time. The prevailing wisdom at the time was you have to spend more to make more. And I completely flipped that around. And I was able to keep overhead and my margins so high that I got a lot of offers from big firms like Baker McKinsey, Baker Hostetler, Holland Knight. They wanted to onboard me as a partner to try to find out, what are you doing and how are you doing it? And of course, when they couldn't figure it out, they were just like, oh, he has to be doing something nefarious. It's just like, no, it's called Google ads. It's called Facebook ads. But I brought it up one time at a conference by this attorney who I knew was kind of following me, kind of curious as to how my firm was growing so fast. And he asked me how I spend my marketing money. And I said, well, a good chunk of it is actually on Facebook. And his response, never going to forget his response. He was like, the place where my kids hang out? And I was just like, you know what? It's that attitude of not generating any revenue. And it's because what a lot of people didn't know, and what was unfortunately weaponized by Trump in 2016, was the power of what's called micro-targeting on social media. I don't want to get too far off track, but it was those types of techniques of keeping overhead down, but still maximizing by focusing on efficiency. And I realized you can bring this to the federal government. You can bring this to social programs. One of the things that the AI tax corporation that we're about to go public with is going to do is we want to do what Elon Musk did for NASA. We want to do for the U.S. Department of Treasury.
Right.
We actually want to come into the U.S. Department of Treasury, start digitizing a lot of the offices, in particular in the Internal Revenue Service. We wanted to be able to digitize collections, client correspondence. There's a lot of aspects that can be digitized. And the fact that I was able to build a company that has now, has a value of $180 million is proof that I know what I'm doing. I know how to actually get this done. And the same can be done with social programs. It can. It's just that we keep on using the old school approach to social programs, and it's very costly. It's very inefficient. And that's why people get very frustrated with government services, right? They always equate government bureaucrats with sloth, that's just there typing with
definitely.
And it's because it is a very accurate sentiment, But yeah, that's the approach that I would bring, which is just bringing a lot of our social programs, a lot of our departments and agencies into the 21st century, reducing that overhead and making it much, much more efficient.
Wow, this is powerful. Thank you so much for that. And so you are bringing real life issues. You're bringing what you have learned as an entrepreneur, as a successful businessman, and applying it to government as a way to create change. And of course, you talk about the digital issue. There are questions I could ask about digitizing stuff. There are fears about the digital world in terms of privacy and security and stuff.
Oh yeah. There's definitely those concerns.
And I know former President Obama is right now talking about looking at how we can regulate communication and information. And I have oftentimes said that social media is one of the greatest victories for movements and the people everywhere, because what it does is it decentralizes information or control, and communication is to make popular what was the monopoly. So in one end, we want to regulate information, but at the other end, we have to be careful, because regulating information, there are various suspicions around regulating information, because there are those who fear. What do you believe about, what is your position on regulation of information?
Yeah, I mean, we have to be careful, and that's something that we are very cognizant of as well. There's a code provision, 6103 of the Internal Revenue Code, which mandates taxpayer privacy, and yeah, it's very difficult. One thing that I think that we really need is we have Air Force, we have Army, we have Marines, now we have Space Force. I think we need a digital force. And I think it needs to be its own branch of government, and unfortunately, instead, what we've done is we've created these sub-agencies or sub-departments within each agency, right? So the CIA has their digital command, NSA, NRO, they all have their digital command. So does Army, Air Force, Navy. But the problem is that it's such a new, it's like a platform for potential warfare now, right? Like they even talk about cyber warfare. And so it's kind of like, the Air Force is in charge of the air, Navy's in charge of the water, Army's in charge of land. And but we do need a cyber force, and it needs to be in charge of the digital space. And that way you get all these sub departments from all these various agencies, whether it's CIA, DIA, even DEA, all of them. DEA has a really good cyber force. Put them all together.
Yeah.
And now you got the best and brightest minds all finally under one roof working together. And that's what's very difficult to accomplish. It's the same reason why they realized that even space was becoming its own, almost like battlefield, right? And that's why they had to bifurcate now, the air from zero gravity space, and that's why we decided to spin off and create the Space Force, which I think was actually a really smart move. But I think the real one that's current now and present is the digital space. And unfortunately, that one is very fractured.
Listen, I think I published an article some time ago talking about the next threat to the world, the next war is on the digital front, and because look what's happening with Russia and with China and so on, and the issue of privacy, information, and I talked about the information sharing between countries, and then the wars between countries can escalate even further privacy issues. I think privacy issue is a major issue. And I think there's not much policy around security or privacy. Personally speaking, I've had tremendous issues with digital security and privacy and data leaks. So that is something I believe that I guess as people, we need to, as leaders, we need to start exploring because you have access to the digital, again, that can create problems for society.
Oh yeah. And just so I'm really clear, one thing I agree with, well, I don't even say agree with the libertarians because I haven't heard them say this. So it has to do with the Fourth Amendment.
Yes.
When the 14th Amendment was passed, for example, in the 1860s, it didn't really have any teeth to it until almost 50 years later when they decided, almost 100 years later, when they decided to expand the 14th Amendment to private actors. Before, it was only seen as applying to the government, kind of like freedom of speech, right? Like Congress shall pass no law abridging, the freedom of speech. I can't remember the precise wording, but you get the point. It limits government involvement, not private involvement, right? So that's why, when big tech companies engage in censorship, it doesn't violate the First Amendment. But one of the things that I have advocated for is we need to extend the Fourth Amendment to private companies, because unfortunately, this loophole has been exploited by our own intelligence community. And what they've done is they've effectively subcontracted a lot of digital espionage to private companies. Then when they violate the Fourth Amendment, they're like, oh, well, that was them. It wasn't us. Private contractors. And I think that's very unfortunate, and it needs to be reined in. And that makes me no friend of the intelligence community. But I need to call it as I see it. And it's a problem. It's being grossly abused. And I could go on a long time on that one. But of course, another one where a lot of people get sensitive is the First Amendment. I don't pick and choose, which amendments I like. And I do think that the First Amendment, it's about time that it extends to private companies as well.
Yes.
If they are deemed to be engaged in providing a public domain and a public forum, I believe that it should. Now, of course, then that sounds like I'm defending Trump and the fact that he was banned from a lot of these programs. Unfortunately, he would benefit from something like this. Again, I think I never think about the current situation. I think, what if the tables are reversed? And you always have to think things that way. And again, that's what our founding fathers were always focused on is, what happens if, the other side gets this, or, so you get the point. But yeah, I really think that the Fourth Amendment should be extended to private actors, and that would include a lot of these data companies. So if they violate your privacy rights, you would have grounds to then sue them in federal court.
This is quite interesting. I have a tremendous amount of questions to ask you about, some real questions. People are asking about issues of subscription. The fact that companies are now requiring subscriptions. People don't purchase products anymore and pay a one-time fee. Now you rent. And people talk about how that creates more poverty in a sense, because now you have to shell out more money, so that affects incomes over time. And then, of course, there are people doing research that looks at the correlation between what customers in society are now requiring to pay because now you're not paying a one-time fee. Now you're paying fees, a subscription. And I wanted to find out what are the views of our political leaders, since those are some of the questions people were asking about. Many things are now subscription-based. That's now creating more poverty. And in a sense, that creates strategy that provides more wealth for some people, but it creates more income disparities and more lack for people in society.
Yeah.
I've thought about the issue of subscription and fee for service and how that is changed the way in which how we look at customers and how we pay for products and stuff. How is that changing in society, and how that creates problems for consumers and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, I feel a lot of that was initially motivated by tax policy.
Yes.
Because if you sell a CD-ROM at Best Buy for Microsoft Word,
Yes.
now that's US-based income. But if you sub-license the technology out to the Netherlands, and then
Yes.
that Dutch holding company sub-licenses a subscription fee out, so like a temporary license, then
Yes.
now Dutch source income, even though it's a US customer. And so that
Yes.
was it was actually tax policy that drove that new design. But then
Okay.
companies started realizing they were making more money off of it, right?
Right.
Now it's not just $100 quick $100.
Yes.
It's less. It's only 15 a month, but it's 15 a month for life.
Right,
So now
that
you've
is
got a
true.
customer for life, pretty much. Unfortunately, this is one of the byproducts of free market capitalism, and I think that somebody needs to step in and provide an alternative. But how do you do that if the
Yes.
government's not enforcing antitrust legislation? So antitrust legislation, for those that don't know, I can go into a long history of why they use the word trust, but it's basically monopolies, right?
Yes.
Monopolies are illegal because you're using your power to effectively and unlawfully neutralize competition. And so it's anti-capitalism when you think about it. It doesn't create competition, because the idea of capitalism is that competition allows the best to prevail, right? So
Right.
if you put a bunch of burger joints, in a mall, 12 months later, most of them will go bankrupt and go under, right? Because the one who makes the best meals and has the best customer service is going to be the one that prevails. And that's the theory behind capitalism. Monopolies, on the other hand, is the one restaurant sabotaging all the others so that they go under. And that way you're forced to buy their product regardless of whether it's good customer service or not. Think of AT&T in the 80s and 90s.
Yes.
And so, but what's happening right now is that they're not enforcing these anti-monopoly laws. Why? Because these monopolies got even smarter. They stopped not only neutralizing their competition, but neutralizing political opposition. And they engaged in lawful bribery through our lobbying system to effectively, again, manipulate our democratic processes to further, entrench themselves, as the dominant force within a particular industry. And again, this is not going to make me any friends, in the corporate community, and the ones that know that they're engaging in this, they can be like, okay, I know too much about how we operate. But that is the truth, exactly how they operate. And so it's a multifaceted approach. We need to go after the lobbying laws, and the way that lobbying is done. It's been corrupted and eroded over time to where basically now it's just legalized bribery. That's all it is. That's all it is. And that's why when I ran my congressional campaign and I self-funded it with like $500,000 of my own money, I didn't take a single dollar, because I didn't want that type of undue influence. Because no matter what any politician says, if a group of people, and they all work for one company and they're all giving you $25,000 and they helped you raise $500,000, if they're basically bankrolling your entire political campaign, you can say you are independent as much as you want, but at the end of the day, if they tell you to do something, you're going to do it. And I feel like a lot of politicians just try to limit their corruption, right? Like, well, only for these groups of people, and it's because I kind of agree with them on most of the things. You're effectively like negotiating your soul, right?
Yes.
And unfortunately, we need changes to the lobbying laws. That needs to be more tightly regulated. It's been way too loose and watered down, since the times of Kennedy, when I feel like it was a little bit better. But that, coupled with, our tax policy, which actually drove, like I said, this initial subscription-based model, and then the enforcement of antitrust legislation. So attacking these monopolies, breaking them up to allow new competitors to come into the market. I think all those three things combined would be the way to address that particular problem.
Thank you. And I have another question for you as we get ready to, not too long from now. And I have a ton load of other questions, but I was, I think I interviewed one of my professors, Dr. Martin Oppenheimer, one of the mentors in my life. And of course, one of the questions I'm going to ask you before we end is, who is your greatest influence and greatest inspiration in your life? Where do you draw inspiration and so on and so forth? And I know I read where you said Americans, and we can explore that. But beyond that, I want to go deeper. But before that, there is something in news about young people and what they're doing. And you said some time ago, 2 days ago, stop looking to the government for help with income disparity and the wage gap. Get off your whatever and unionize. Stop asking and start demanding. Fight for it. And I know at Amazon, young people are out there demonstrating, and it's as if and then over the weekend, young people organized the Stop the Violence March and so on and so forth. So you are here, you said, so this was quite profound, and I thought it was quite powerful when you said that one of the ways we can create change is to stop asking for it and to unionize. And I think I study unions as well, as that's in my book, Neoliberalism Globalization. Unions are in the decline in the US, and they're still weak. But what is your proposal in terms of this issue of unions and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is free market capitalism. And again, yes. With a lot of capitalists, when we bring up, whenever I bring up unions, they're always just like, oh, well, we don't like that,
Yes.
So you like individual responsibility and you like individual freedoms, but not when those freedoms are an organized effort to demand higher wages and better benefits.
Yes.
And so, again, it's a little bit of that, political hypocrisy. But yeah, absolutely. This is free market capitalism. It's freedom of contract. And just like, I, as a business owner, I'm free to, engage in business. My employees are free to organize if they feel that I'm mistreating them or not paying them properly. Okay. All my employees get paid very, very well and have very, very generous health benefits as well. I do that because of my background, because I'm a union. Yes. And I want to make sure that, I take care of them. If they're healthy and happy, they're going to be healthy and happy, making this company more money. And we're all going to, benefit, together as a result of it. So that being said, I absolutely support unions. I think that, whenever I'm against centralization of power in any sense, whether it's in whether it's wealth, whether it's the income disparity. I don't like it whenever things are one-sided. I like things balanced. That's really what I'm about. And so when I see that in gross imbalance, with companies that are posting billions and billions in profit, and yet their employees are going home and checking on their, housing benefits and checking on their SNAP food benefits. To me, that's upsetting. And it's because these companies can afford to pay living wages. Yeah. Yet they have economists, and their financial office that actually take this into account. Well, if we pay them at this level, they'll be eligible for these benefits, and so that's as though their salary is actually up here. And what you're actually saying is we can effectively shift this onto the government's credit card, right? The national just keeps going higher and higher. We've already just become numb to it. And I disagree with that. I disagree with that wholly. I think this burden needs to go where it belongs, which is you have a duty, you have a responsibility toward your talent, towards your team, towards your employees. Right. And unfortunately, I think it's a result of the 80s, where things were just very disconnected. For example, most people, this is a concept that most people don't even really think about, but it's small things like this that matter. Yeah. What do we call the department that's in charge of managing all of the talent and all of your team members? We call it human resources. Right. Think about that term for a second. A human resource. What is a resource? A resource is something that you extract, you expend, and then there's something that's left over, the byproduct, and you just discard it like garbage. And what are me and you? We're human beings, but we're people. We're family. We're team members. We're husbands, fathers, brothers. But calling a person a human is as disconnected as it gets. And so referring to your people as human resources, is just about as gross as it can get when you think about it. But we've just come to accept that term. But that's why even here we refuse to call it human resources. We call it talent management department. It's just like at the end of the day, that's what we're doing. We're managing our talent. We're helping develop them. We're treating them like family. And again, I think it starts with terminology, and then from there we can start changing, the way that we do business and conduct business.
Yes. Okay. Then two more questions as we get to wrap up. But you said that you said some time ago that I'm probably the only Republican who's been calling for long-term investments in solar, wind, and hydroelectric energy for years. And you went on to say, everyone wants energy independence. They just don't want liberal green energy companies to get rich accomplishing it. But the question is, you believe that we can, and I know, you said you're a balanced person and like that. Because some time before you talked about the fact that you still want to look at oil drilling and explore so that we can become more independent, energy independent. So what are your views in terms of how do we, at the same time, what are your views in terms of views on the planet and the ozone layer and the position and at the same time developing energy independence while exploring solar energy and so on and this is some of these things are new concepts, and you're a young American, so in a way you get an opportunity to lead the charge and to educate people some more about that. And so I would like to hear your position on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, the Republican Party used to be known as the party of environmentalism. Under Teddy Roosevelt, he was a big environmentalist. He's one that really advocated for the expansion of the national parks system in the United States. And somewhere along the way, I feel like the Republican Party just got derailed. And they equated environmentalism with tree hugging, and it's just kind of like, look, it's about when I talk to my fellow Republicans about this, I like to do the Christian angle, which is that we are stewards of God's earth. That's at the end of the day. Like, yes, we're Republican, we're Democrats, we're this, we're that. But we also have a duty towards God and duty towards preserving this earth and all of its majestic beauty. I've seen a lot of it, and it's gorgeous, and I don't want to see it ruined. And even if there's a 1% chance that humans could be contributing to this, why not? And also let's look at it from a national security standpoint. Do we really want to stay reliant on Saudi oil? Do we really want that? And so and of course people will say well, there's a difference between oil and coal, right? Coal is for the electricity, oil is for gasoline. But it's but if we increase domestic production of the grid, like, for example, I'll give you a quick example. If everybody tomorrow bought a Tesla and started driving a Tesla tomorrow, we'd have blackouts nationwide. Why? Because the grid can't support it, because it doesn't create that much electricity yet. We'd have to pump out more coal. And so the only way to really sustain putting all these vehicles on the grid is to start expanding the grid and empowering the grid with infusing it with more energy. And so that is going to require more wind turbines, and now it's just gotten ridiculous, right? Like now most people that are anti-green energy, which I hate calling it green energy, it's just infinite sources of energy. And with these free infinite sources of energy, right, that God gave us, it's the wind, it's the sun, it's the water. God's basically like, I gave you guys this free energy and you're not using it. What the hell's wrong with you? And so it's like we need to be investing in this infrastructure. To me, it's like it's God's infrastructure. Let's invest in this. Let's expand it. And if we had this, we'd be able to shift more vehicles onto the grid, and that means less oil. We wouldn't need as much oil, and that would again decrease our reliance on these foreign imports of oil, and that goes towards energy independence. But what people don't understand is that energy independence isn't some finish line, right? We accomplished it for a few months under Obama. We accomplished it for a few months under Trump. But something always happens. Why? Because you think the Saudis are fools? They know what we're trying to do. And they're always going to try to engineer some sort of international crisis or issue or market manipulation in order to frustrate our ability to become independent. Think of it like a drug dealer. Like if you see the person trying to go clean, you're going to try to find a way to make them reliant on your product, just like the subscription service. They see that, there might be new market entrants that are going to offer flat fees again. They'll do everything in their monopolistic power to frustrate that and to derail those plans. So that being said, energy independence is something that is not just like a one-time accomplishment. It's something that we need to accomplish and then sustain, because there are going to be market participants out there, i.e. Saudi Arabia. They're going to do everything in their power to try to frustrate that and try to prevent that from happening. And so when we view it as a national security issue, I think that would get more conservatives on board. But like I said, what I've generally found is that they don't want to support this because a lot of the people leading these companies tend to lean left. And so they're like, oh no, now we're just making a new generation of liberal billionaires, and they don't want to be a part of that. And it's just kind of like, it's frustrating.
It is frustrating, and that's part of the suspicion. And I have three questions, quick questions, if you can, that some young people ask me. This is Zion Shadid. She is 17 years old. She's a singer, songwriter, rapper, producer from Virginia, but now lives in Philadelphia. Been living in Philadelphia for 10 years, I think. She said, Mr. Castro, what steps are you taking in order to move us forward as a society? What are you doing for us, for the positivity of the people?
I'm so sorry. I had an alarm go off. Can you repeat that one last?
Yes, she says, what steps are you taking or will you take in order to move us forward as a society? What are you doing for us or for the positivity of the people?
I think it's bringing that bipartisanship back.
Okay.
I think that's it. What unfortunately social media in the internet age, because when you think about it, the internet age is brand new, right? As human beings, we've just been given this new service that allows all of us to communicate. And what did we do? We all retreated into our echo chambers. So, instead of communicating with each other, we did the same freaking thing we were already doing before.
Right.
We just did it in the digital space. And I think that's unfortunate. I used to really enjoy shows like Crossfire, where you'd have somebody representing the liberals and somebody representing the conservatives, and they would each hash out their ideas. They try things similar to that now, but you can tell if it's a left-wing program, they bring in the most ridiculous right-wing person. And then if it's a right-wing program, they bring in the most ridiculous left-wing person, right? That way it makes the other side look ridiculous. But I'm talking about bringing in intellectuals on both sides and having these public forums and these very respectable public debates. And that way people get educated. People understand where, okay, now I see where the Republicans are coming from on this issue. I still disagree with them, but at least I know that they're not totally ridiculous or they're not motivated out of, something evil. I truly believe that everybody is motivated out of love for this country. We just have, and we all want to get to where we're going, right? Which is a better country, a better nation. We just have a difference of opinion as to what that is and how to get there. That's the only thing. But we all love this country. Liberals, far left, they love this country. Republicans, far right, they love this country. We all love this country. We just, again, we disagree on the means and the end goal. But again, and I think it's what I view a really important part of my candidacy is going to be bridging that ideological divide, bridging those echo chambers. And
I know Obama tried that one. Sorry to interrupt you. That was about platform at once. I think I remember some time when Obama became president, he wanted to lead by bipartisanship, and he wanted to bring everybody together. But the first couple of years, it was very difficult to get anything through, and so on and so forth.
Exactly. And so I think that, look, when you're talking with people, the American people in particular, the American electorate, the American voters, I think that was his golden opportunity, and I think he did it extremely well. Obviously, but once you have power, you can't be shy about utilizing it. And I felt like, unfortunately, that would be my critique of Obama's first 2 years in office. Is that he was given a mandate and he didn't have I'm going to take a lot of heat for this. He didn't have the courage to use it. I really felt that was a missed opportunity on his part, right? For a lot of his plans and his agenda. But of course, when you saw that Trump got that same effective mandate and they got he was not afraid about using it. And that's why a lot of his policies got enacted. And he was really able to reshape and reform the federal government in a lot of very unique and unprecedented ways. And a lot of people, of course, on the left were extremely upset at that. But one thing I always said is, hey, he was given power. At least he has the courage to use it. And he's using it very, very effectively. And so, again, there's when you're campaigning, it's about enlightening your fellow Americans, bringing everybody together so that they can make a wise and informed decision about who they want to lead their nation. But after that, when you're given power, it's not election mode anymore. It's time to use that power and to put your policies and what people voted and believed in. It's time to put that into action. So in other words, the campaigning, it's talk. Once you're in power, it's action. And and I feel like that's unfortunately where some politicians go wrong. They get in power and they want to keep talking. Right. And it's kind of like, man, like the time for talking's over. Like they gave you the power.
Yeah, it's time for action. And you are a man of action, it seems. But I know we've been talking for probably an hour, but I have two, and I know we've said an hour, but do you have any more time for?
Yeah, I have time. Yeah.
Oh, great. So here's another question. What do you believe is the best way to change our community? Well, I guess this is, and you've already alluded to that by saying that, brick communist, but this is Jaden, a young man. And he says that he's about 17 years old. He said, what do you believe is the best way to change our community? And another young man, Zachary, says, how would you change around what's going on? Every now and then, there's lots of helicopters and sirens, as if we are a surveillance community. And this is a young man in Philadelphia. And if you don't, and Philadelphia, in many of these communities, Chicago, so on, they're beset by violence, and the violence is on the rise. And while poverty people are falling, poverty is on the increase, and not just poverty, but even people who are already poor are experiencing abject poverty, and so on and so forth. So these are some of the questions. And so, what would you like to respond to Zachary here and Jaden? How would you change around what's going on every now and then? There is lots of helicopters and sirens. I guess he's alluding to the violence, and probably because what's going on in Philadelphia, and I guess that's more specific. But would you want to talk about gun violence and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so it's what I had mentioned before about how we're becoming a surveillance state, and it's because the Fourth Amendment is. I mean, as it applies to the government, has already been severely watered down, and then it doesn't even apply to private actors. So, if you're a government agency, all you have to do is subcontract out, surveillance to, a private market participant, and there you go. You completely circumvent the Fourth Amendment. But yes, it's unfortunate that we have to balance the need to effectively police communities and keep, families safe, but also. In other words, we need to think of new ways of policing. And unfortunately, I can see the police department's efforts here of just like, hey, look, we're trying to keep families safe, right? I grew up in the hood. I know what that's like. Just before I go into this, let me just give a little bit of background on that, just so that people can know that I can relate. When people say, oh, what was it like for you growing up? Growing up for me was Saturday night. Playing basketball in the street with my friends, and then having to hit the floor because an AK-47 started sounding off down the street. There was a crack house down at the end of my street in Laredo, Texas, on Elm Street. People want to look it up if they don't believe me. My aunt lived at 818 East Elm Street in Laredo, Texas. That's where I lived. And right down the street was an apartment complex. And there were 3 times where there were drive-by shootings. So that was my childhood. My childhood was calling the police with active gunfire going off, and then the police showing up 35 minutes later. 35 minutes later. Yet now that I live in a very affluent neighborhood, I call the police about, I can see a suspicious animal and there'll be a police, there'll be like 2 police vehicles outside my front door within 3 to 4 minutes tops. So like 160 seconds there at my front door. So I know what it's like. And the difference is I grew up a little bit upset with police officers because how I felt that they discriminated in their ability to provide effective policing to poor areas. But then in the 90s, as I got older, I started seeing how there was over policing.
Right.
And so then the police departments were just like, oh, well, these poor people are never happy, right? We under police, they complain. We over police, they complain. Well, again, it's like what I said before. I'm all about balance, moderation, and unfortunately, we've become an extreme society. We're either extreme, we're not going to give you any policing, or we're going to over police the hell out of you. And so it's kind of like, again,
Yes.
we have to find that balance. And, I would want to look more into that particular issue of what's going on in Philadelphia.
Yes.
Bring it to my attention, because I'd want to see how we can strike that balance. But the fact that there are young people, complaining about it would suggest to me that they've gone to the extreme end now, which is over policing. Or like, how in Chicago at one point the police threatened to not provide any policing to the Port.
Yes.
Oh, you're protesting against it? We're not going to provide.
Right. Yes.
I understand their frustration. I get it, from the police side and from the community side. But again, I think it's because we're failing to find that balance, that moderation. And so, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'll want to look a lot more into that. But like I said, I think it would likely stem from an overreaction and
yes,
of over policing.
You talk about balance, and my next question is going to be, what are your greatest fears? But how do we find that balance? And you're aspiring to be one of the leaders of the free world, like we say. And how do we find that balance? And I guess that's probably one of your greatest work as if you were to aspire to become president. If you were to become president, how do you find that balance? And what will you do in order to get to that balance?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that with the brain and with the wisdom that God gave me, and with all the life circumstances that He put me in, gave me a very well-rounded view of the world. I've been on the far left. I've been out in the streets marching for living wages and unionizing actual workers. I've been out boots on the ground. And now I've been on the other side. I've been a business owner. I've been in charge of employees and payroll, millions in payroll, and having to decide on how to provide health benefits in an affordable way for the business that's sustained. So now I got to see the other side, like, oh wow, this stuff isn't free, somebody has to pay for it, and finding again that balance. And so, unfortunately, I don't think it's something that can necessarily be found by anyone other than somebody that has a very well-rounded experience. And we need to find these well-rounded leaders that can look at both sides and find that common ground. It's very hard, but again, it's something that I have found that I have a knack for. I'm able to sit down with Republicans and get them to quickly see both sides. Again, I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative. I'm still going to lean towards my party's policy positions, but I'm going to try to find a way to accomplish these goals in a way that's palatable for liberals. So for example, again, Reagan. What did Reagan want to do? He wanted to support Wall Street. He wanted to see a big economic boom. And so what did he do? He found a way to subsidize wages for these corporations by putting it on government's credit card. How did he do that? The earned income tax credit, right? It's a very novel way. Now we can look at it in retrospect and say, hey, that's corporate socialism, right? That's corporate handouts. Let's try to find a way, like now that we're a healthy economy again, let's try to shift it back to companies. But maybe we're about to enter into a recession, so maybe we should maintain it for a while. But it's that type of seeing both sides and fully understanding it that empowers me with the ability to find that middle ground, and to stay away from toxic ideology. Again, I still believe in conservative principles. That's the foundation. That's what drives all my policy positions. But I'll always do it in a way where we can get at least 70-75% of the public behind it. And again, that was the artful tactic of Bill Clinton. That was the artful tactic of Ronald Reagan. Yes, there's no question Ronald Reagan was a Republican conservative, right? He's like the hero, but he was still able to reach out to the other side and get people. Right. And Clinton as well. There's no question he was a Democrat. There's no question he was a liberal, but he was able to reach out to the other side and find ways to get them to buy in to the positions. And so again, that's what my candidacy is about. It's probably not the right time, because we're hyper politicized, but it has to start somewhere, and it's going to start with my candidacy.
Yeah,
I'm going to start.
And one last question. Yes, and sorry to cut you off right there. One older gentleman said, "Oh, I'm concerned about my Medicare. Do you have any position in healthcare, or just reach out to the seniors who I spoke with? Many persons said, what are your plans for Medicare and so on?" He said, "Please, I love Medicare. Please don't do too much with it. What are your position on Medicare?"
Yeah. I mean, Medicare is great. I want to leave it where it's at. As
Okay.
far as our healthcare system, I wanted to do something that was pretty similar, but a little bit different with a capitalist twist of what the Brits did with the national, the healthcare system. I wanted to create a national healthcare council, but kind of like, and this is where libertarians hate the analogy, but this is the only analogy, unfortunately, I can make. But again, is the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, a lot of people don't know this, it's really a brokered power sharing agreement between the banking establishment and the United States government. Okay. And there's a whole book on it, called The Creature of Jekyll Island. And just for my
Creature of Jekyll Island, guys.
Yeah. The Creature of Jekyll Island was it was actually a negotiation that took place in an island called Jekyll Island. Which sounds like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. What they did is they created this new system, the Federal Reserve, and their shared power between the CEOs of the major banks and then government bureaucrats. And together they create monetary policy and set banking policy. And unfortunately, as much as libertarians hate this, it was the best we could do at that time, because there was a lot of dangers and a lot of the cons outweigh the pros when you have just a regular U.S. central bank.
Right.
I too much to go into this episode, but
yes.
If people read the book The Creature of Jekyll Island, they would understand. I want to learn from that, but build something similar but better, avoiding those mistakes that we made with the Federal Reserve, and create a national healthcare council. Yes. And having the National Healthcare Council and putting all those companies together, along with government bureaucrats, what that effectively does is it creates a de facto single payer system, but it's a privatized single payer system. And so by doing that, we would be able to dramatically drive down healthcare costs. The power elite that's currently in power, the status quo, wouldn't object to it, right? Because it's further entrenching their power by putting them on this permanent council, much like the Federal Reserve. That's why the banking CEOs accepted it when the Federal Reserve was created, because they knew that, hey, this is making us pretty much like permanent fixtures of the United States economic system. And so this would be the one way where Wall Street would be on board, liberals would be on board, because they'd be like, well, it's a de facto, single payer system, so let's do it. And I think it would drive down healthcare costs, and so the entire American public and electorate could get behind it. But it's what they always say: the devil's in the details. So we have to broker this and negotiate in a way where we're not just thinking of an immediate solution, but the fact that this could be a permanent part of our system for the next 150 years. So we have to make sure we get it right. I felt like they rushed to the Federal Reserve System, and that's why they call it the Creature of Jekyll Island. Because it was just fraught with a lot of loopholes and which opens the door to potential abuses. But that would be my solution. And again, best of both worlds. The right would not object to that; they'd actually kind of like the idea. Liberals would too. Again, it's not everybody's dream. Neither side would be totally happy, but it would be a permanent solution to fixing our national healthcare system.
Yes. And what are your greatest fears? One young man said he got into Temple and dropped out because I asked him, your student loan, why you could have applied for student loan? He said, no, I would have, when I'm finished, I would have 40,000 plus interest. One of the young men said, because he had to look after his 5 or 6 other young children, and these are things that you can relate to, because you had an experience where you've seen all that, and you've seen all of that happening in society, where vulnerable and marginal groups in society are struggling too. But what are your fears as you think about this new thrust of yours and this endeavor? What are your fears, and fears for the future, fears for the present, and second, this is a two-part question. And how do you plan to get over them?
Okay, I missed the first part because.
Oh, sorry. What are your fears? as you think about the future and this new thrust that you're embarking on? What are your fears in life?
Oh, yes, yes. My fears is based in history, which is that there's that old saying, "Don't kill the messenger." Everybody knows that saying, right? Well, it's a saying for a reason. It's that all throughout history, messengers have been killed.
Mhm.
And so, unfortunately, we're trying to bring a message. We're trying to say something positive, something good, and unfortunately, some people just don't like being told that, and so that's always a concern.
Right.
But especially in this hyper politicized environment, we saw things happening like where the Trump supporters were trying to run a Biden bus off the road.
Yes.
We saw all this ridiculousness, right? This radicalization of,
Yes.
one side in particular, but both sides are becoming hyper politicized and pulled apart, to both extreme ends. But this also roots back to gerrymandering. It's the Supreme Court has not had the political spine, to do something about it, and to put an end to gerrymandering and try to create a formula. They'd rather just do this hands-off approach and watch our republic erode from within. And so, I have my fears, and I have my concerns about doing this, about making it. The central part of my candidacy is that I'm going to be suing Trump in New Hampshire when the primary, and
I'm so happy you brought that up. That's what I wanted to ask you about. And you said that only certain people have that authority to do so, and so on and so forth. But yes, sorry about that.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the courts have elaborated on this term called standing. Where you have to have a direct injury, and a voter doesn't have a direct injury. I disagree with that. Just out there for all the viewers, I think that every single American would have a direct injury if somebody disqualified was running. But unfortunately, the courts have not held that, and unfortunately, once it goes to the general election, they view it as what's called a political question, which is their way of saying we're not going to resolve that. So the conclusion, based on all my legal research, is that it would have to be a fellow Republican presidential primary candidate that brings this suit against Trump to allow the federal judiciary the opportunity to determine the extent to which Section 3 of the 14th Amendment anti-insurrection disqualification clause applies to Trump. And I fully intend on doing that. And as you can imagine, with some of his fanatical supporters and some.
Sorry for those of us who didn't understand what you repeat that again. You full intend on doing what?
Oh, I fully intend on suing Donald Trump in New Hampshire. New Hampshire. The reason why it's New Hampshire is because that's the first Republican primary in the country. Okay. And so the filing for that would open, I believe, the second Tuesday of November 2023, so next year.
Yes.
And I would have to wait. I'm going to be there like the morning it opens, right?
Yes.
We'd have to wait until Trump files, and then we're both candidates. Yes. And then literally at that moment, we're going to just electronically file the federal complaint. Yes. And so at that point, it kicks off the litigation, between John Anthony Castro versus Donald John Trump. And it would be the question of whether he is disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which says any person that has given aid or comfort or participated in any way in an insurrection is ineligible to hold public office. And so we'll see at that point if the federal judiciary has the spine and guts to bring on this issue and to make a declaration. But I can tell you that, the fact that everybody's already rallying behind DeSantis in Florida is evidence that they think Trump is going down in flames. But that's a big part of my my candidacy. But because I view him as poison and toxic, and so a lot of people are like, but you're about bipartisanship, bringing everybody together. So why are you trying to have Trump disqualified? And it's just like, look, you can't have toxic poison in the mixture when you're trying to bring people together, because there's an active element that is trying to prevent that, and you have to neutralize that first. Once we neutralize that, then we can bring everybody together. And so, but unfortunately,
I understand where you're coming from here. Sorry to cut. Here is it that you're about bipartisanship. You believe that you are against extremism because you believe that that's against progress, and it will be hypocritical to what you're about if you don't. And some of these there is a process to this. You know, at the same time, you have to also root out the toxic while at the same time think about moving forward from that. But it begins with things like these. And you believe that Mr. Trump is part of the toxic, and you believe he bears any responsibility for what happened in January 6th?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so I've reviewed a lot of the evidence from the January 6th committee. And I think when they finally put this all together into, it's going to be a book like the 9/11 Commission report. I think it's going to be very clear that this was orchestrated starting 2 days after the election. And it had to do with the fact that they were immediately replacing people in the Pentagon. They were putting people in key positions. They were changing the authority over who could activate the National Guard. They were immediately promoted Michael Flynn's brother, gave him an extra star, and then put him in the right department. They would oversee and have direct power over the National Guard and other elements of protection in Washington, D.C. There is no doubt. A lot of people just don't know this yet because it hasn't been revealed yet. They were actively trying to overthrow the American Republic. They were going to overthrow it. That was their goal. They only decided to back down when they saw that things weren't going as planned. The plan was to zip tie members, hold them hostage, get the rest to flee, and then at that point make a declaration of a new republic. They were literally going to overthrow the entire federal government. They think that people like me and others are being hysterical, and it's just because they haven't seen the evidence yet. But I think once the evidence is revealed, they're going to see how close the American experiment came to completely collapsing.
Oh, thank you so much. And what are your and I may have asked you these questions already, but where do you draw your greatest inspiration from? And I haven't asked you about you. And do you have siblings? And tell me, and do you have a family? And how do they inspire you? So this question is probably several pronged, but where do you get your inspiration? What drives you when you get up in the morning? What makes you tick and so on?
Yeah, I mean, I draw my inspiration from a lot of sources. Our founding fathers, Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine. I know most people don't view Thomas Paine as a founding father. I do, because it was his writings that led to the free thinking movement. Abraham Lincoln, JFK, Teddy Roosevelt, Ronald Reagan. A lot of people. Yeah. I mean, I think everybody, because you ask a Republican who are your greatest heroes, right? They'll always say Teddy Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln, and Ronald Reagan, right? Like the readers. And to me, it's both sides. It's all sides. It's everybody. In more of the social realm, Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi. It's very focusing on the peaceful part. That you can make change. There are a lot of people that don't believe you can't make change except through violent means, right? Like the only real power comes from the barrel of a gun. That's a very popular saying. But I don't agree with that, and that's what politics is about. Politics is about influencing people. It's about talking to them, explaining your side of the story, and getting them to slowly agree. They might not fully agree, but at least if you can get them to at least see where you're coming from, that in and of itself is powerful, because now you've made that person more well-rounded. And at least they can intellectually disagree with you, fully understanding your side of the story as well. But it will get them to slightly change their position as well, having newfound knowledge and understanding. So yeah, absolutely, from a lot of different sources. Growing up, my brother was a big influence on me, and he was the one that introduced me to politics. And
your brother is older than you, younger?
My brother's older than me by 4 years. And when I was in high school, he introduced me to the anti-globalization movement. Against the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. The Battle of Seattle in 1999 and all of that. And so that was sort of my introduction into, our rigged corporate economy.
And I've written about that. All of what you have just said, every single issue that you have spoken about is in my book, Neoliberalism. I've done research about
nice.
That because people don't understand the World Trade Organization, the IMF, and especially if you are from the global south or you have any kind of affiliation with the global south. And by that, when I talk about the global south, I'm talking about developing countries or so on. Many they have experience with the IMF and so on and so forth. So I can understand what you're saying here. But continue with that. Continue. I apologize for cutting you.
No. So
saying that because yes.
Yeah. So that was my introduction into global politics, and then understanding how our rigged corporate economy works.
Yes.
And then what to kind of do about it. Because again, they always try to paint it as a false equalization, I guess. Like I forgot what the term is, but basic false equivalence. That's it.
Yes.
Because they say, oh, if you're against our current economy, then you're anti-capitalist, right? You're a socialist, you're a communist. And it's just like, no, I'm not. I believe in free market capitalism. And what we have right now in the United States is not free market capitalism. It's rigged corporatism. There's a difference. If we had free market capitalism, you'd have entrepreneurs being able to start up very easily. You'd have you'd have a very robust small business economy, right? Think of the 1960s. We had more wealth. We had a robust middle class because a lot of businesses were locally owned. The local pharmacy, the local butcher, all of that. And now that's all been replaced with Walmart, CVS, Walgreens. And so, that means that when you spend money in your local community, it goes out. It goes out to Wall Street investors in New York. And so, again, that's what I always tell people, because once I start talking about labor unions and living wages, it's rare to think like, oh, you're a socialist. It's just like,
yes, that is true.
It's that is true. Liberty and the freedom of contract. And then I tell them, if you really want to get into what capitalism really
but you're about protecting capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
You're about, in other words, so you're saying that the capitalism that we have now is not the capitalism that we have then, the one that promotes individualism and fairness and free competition and so on and so forth. So you're saying that by promoting some of these unions and having stronger involvement in government and so on, this is important.
Yeah. So, absolutely.
Capitalism. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I felt like it was really good in the 60s,
Yes.
But then, all throughout the 70s, especially the 80s, and the 90s and 2000s, you had this consolidation of corporate power.
Yes.
And I know that, look, naturally in a capitalist economy, you're going to have corporations emerge, right? Because they provide just a better product, a better service. But then again, like I mentioned before, you get into that uncompetitive behavior where you start sabotaging your competitors. You start abusing the lobbying process to create new illegal barriers to new entrants. And again, it's me having later in life studied at Harvard Business School and starting to understand how they do and manipulate the system later, that I started understanding like, oh, okay, so that's how they got to the position that they're at now. And so the question is, how do we resolve it now? Well, we have the laws on the books, the anti-monopoly laws. We're just not enforcing them. Because every time we think about enforcing them against Google or Facebook or AT&T or any of these corporate Goliaths, they start pumping millions of dollars in federal lobbying, and they buy out state legislatures. They bought out the entire U.S. Congress already. And so yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, but like I said, my background, my knowledge, and my understanding, I know how to approach this. I know what needs to be done to actually fix the system. And it would be in a way where we could definitely get bipartisan support to rally behind it.
Great. And finally, you just said something about companies being bought out and so on and so forth. One young man said to me, ask John Castro this for me, please. I'm like, what is it? He said, I asked him, I hope, what are his plans before he gets contaminated by the system? No. And this is a fair question. I mean, he said that a lot of people have great intentions and pure intentions, and then they get into office. I know I need to break. A lot of people have pure intentions and so on. Yeah. They get
power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts. Absolutely.
Right. So,
and then I mean the lobbying system in Washington D.C. was specifically created to give the power elite control. Right. I mean, it's like I don't want to get too far off topic, and I want to focus on staying pure, but. Like here in Texas, for example, a lot of people are surprised to find out that all of our judges are elected. Even our Supreme Court judges are elected. And so people ask why. Well, you have to go back to the founding of the Republic. The landowners, which were the aristocracy at that time, the elites, the status quo, they did not like the idea of an independent judiciary. So what did they do? They made judges electable. Why?
Yeah.
Well, because through elections and bankrolling their campaigns, you can effectively control the judges. And so think of the same concept applies to the lobbying system. Why was the lobbying system created to begin with? It legalizes bribery. Well, it was created because the elite they were afraid of people in Washington, D.C. being too independent.
Yes.
So they wanted to have a way to corrupt them and to erode their independence with time. And I knew this from the get-go, which is why my first, both my campaigns for Senate, which Senate was more of a PR stunt, I'll be honest. The congressional race, though, was more serious. I spent over $500,000 of my own money, but I did not take a single dollar. And that's specific by design. I don't want to be corrupted. And that's me acknowledging that money is a corrupting influence, right?
Yes.
As much as I say that I'm pure, it would become difficult, right? If somebody is giving me $2-3 million through a super PAC for me to not answer that person's phone call or not to give that person special access or special preferential treatment. And that is why I decided from the get-go, I need to focus on my business bona fides first, build a successful company, sell it for everything it's worth, and then use that wealth that I generate to run an entirely independent campaign. And so that is why in this campaign, we want to put a lot of money into New Hampshire to see how I perform. But it's all going to be contingent on New Hampshire to see how if we can get at least the top 3, I might consider. I think either way we're going to go all the way to the convention, and I can get into strategy later. But I think that I'm running now. I definitely want to win. We want to see how we're going to do in New Hampshire, but I'm still young. I'm 38 years old, and I fully intend.
You're how old?
38.
Oh, I told him that you were 44, but you are 38.
Yeah, I'm 38. I'm 38.
Younger than me. You're younger than me. Yes.
Yeah, but I'm definitely not. This is not the first time and first and last time I'm running. I'm
right,
running.
That's true.
And I think this may become a thing for me. I'm going to keep running until the American people feel fit to select me to lead the nation.
And what's different about this time than the last time?
Well, you mean the congressional run?
Yes.
I mean, no,
because you ran already, and you're running again. So what is different? What's new about it and new about you?
Oh, what's new? Yes. So, I mean, as we've been putting together the strategy, and we've already had people volunteer, come up as volunteers in New Hampshire, Iowa, California, Florida, New Mexico, Nevada. I mean, we have people all over the place. I'm putting together the campaign infrastructure. And that's why some people are asking, like, oh, is this a serious run? I would not be spending. I'm a very busy man.
Yes.
I'm not only building the company, but I'm also setting the ground. And this is the reason why I'm starting so early. Is that I know I'm not going to get any party support, right, from the Republican National Committee. So I'm going to have to do all this on my own.
Yes.
But I'm already putting together the campaign infrastructure to make this possible. And I'm also letting my campaign volunteers know this isn't a one-off presidential campaign. I hope we get lucky. And that we can come out on top in New Hampshire, and that might drive the momentum, and there might be a sudden like Obama type surprise, where nowhere. But I do also acknowledge that the likelihood of that is very low. So I'm letting all of our volunteers know that I'm in this for the next 16 to 24 years. There's going to be multiple presidential campaigns until again we can convince the American people that our ideas are solid, that we can actually get stuff done. And when we start getting away from this divisiveness and start coming together again as a country, they're going to be looking to leaders that were the leaders of that bipartisan movement that helped achieve that. And that's where we feel that we can then emerge and then run a very successful presidential campaign and then hopefully be in charge of leading the free world.
And I know I'm going to ask you, like, if people want to get involved in your campaign, where they can go to, but I hope I don't forget that question, because I want to ask you about community development, which is probably the last 2 questions. Community development, a lot of people in communities, they're saying that as much as we talk about stimulus and so on and so forth, but communities, it's as if the investments, the financing, the funding, it's not reaching the community level. And people are not, I hear Shaquille O'Neal saying that, they're setting up a Mama Papa fund, but it's still not reaching. There's so much talent in communities, and I do research as well, anthropological studies. I go into communities. I go into cities. I do comparative study. I go into communities and I ask, hundreds of questions. I get involved in the community, want to see what's going on, and it's not reaching them. So many talent and so on. Is there any plans that you have in terms of access and reach and just get really connecting in terms of business and community development and so on?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like what you said. The difference between you and I and others is that we roll up our sleeves and we go out there. I didn't hire a bunch of people to try to do union organizing for me when I was in college. I went out and I did it myself. I started knocking on doors, meeting with sanitation workers for the city and convincing them to sign a union card. I went knocking door to door on, fast food restaurants and trying to get them to sign up for the Service Employees International Union. But a lot of other people don't do that. They don't do that, where the metal meets the meat, boots on the ground, roll up your hands and get your own hands dirty. And I think that's unfortunately what a lot of people don't do. And so, unfortunately, that means that a lot of money just ends up getting wasted on the inefficient administration of those funds, and then they don't actually end up hitting the community. The difference between, again, me and others is that I would actually go out into the communities. I would actually see, do a boots on the ground inspection, and unfortunately, that's the only way that it can be done. It requires a lot more literal legwork, but if you want to see your vision come to fruition, you have to be willing to put in the energy. And that's what I've generally found in politics. There's a lot of passion, but there's not enough actual boots on the ground energy being done.
Yeah, so you're not about talk, you're about action and getting things done.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to have a good plan, right? So you don't want to get in there without a plan. But it's this, again, balance. I've found that there are a lot of leaders out there that are too obsessed with precision. They want everything to be accurate before they pull the trigger. But then a lot of times that obsession with precision can lead to inaction. But then there's entrepreneurs like me, right? That we just sometimes roll the dice, shoot first, ask questions later. And that's so reckless, So that's this extreme end. And so what I've generally found, being in both politics and business, is to find that middle ground, where you can do the planning, but also you have to have a clear red line that by this date we're pulling the trigger. So do the best you can planning, but then you eventually have to execute. And again, you have to actually be boots on the ground and inspecting these communities and making sure that the funding is actually reaching them. And so again, having personally experienced that, I think it puts me in a really good position to, and a lot of people don't like this, micromanaging. They view micromanaging as a bad thing. In the business world, it can be a bad thing sometimes. But I think in government, especially as an executive, being the executive of the executive branch, you have to micromanage. You have to make sure that your agencies are doing what they're told, because these agencies have employees that do not agree with your political views. This is what is sometimes referred to as bureaucratic resistance. Biden is experiencing this right now with Trump holdovers. And Obama experienced it with some of the Bush holdovers. You'll always have the bureaucracy, and these are just ordinary people that don't agree with your political views, and you're trying to implement a policy, and they're going to do everything they can to derail it. And so again, as an executive, you need to be at those departments, you need to be in those communities and making sure that your policies are actually being effectuated. And it's also that understanding and that knowledge that I would bring to the table of being able to make sure that nobody's screwing with our agenda.
Yes. Oh, great. Thank you so much. And guys, for those of us who are just joining us, we're here with the 2024 presidential candidate, John Anthony Castro. It is refreshing. A young man who is very experienced, who has tremendous hope and dreams, and coming up from a grassroots organization, and he's taking the world on by storm. So much vision, so much passion, so much hope, so many ideas, man. And how can people get involved in your campaign and what you're doing?
Just go to johncastro.com, and I'm really big on Twitter right now. So I would invite people to Twitter. I know everybody's really upset right now with Elon Musk taking over.
Yes.
But I just say, look, you're not going to win over people by staying in an echo chamber. And if anything good is going to come out of Elon Musk, it's going to be that he forces everybody into a room together. And yeah, some of us dislike each other. Nobody can tell me they dislike Trump more than me. I'm literally making my entire campaign about suing him. Right? You know, so
Yes.
You know, nobody can ever accuse me of liking Trump. But
Yes.
I don't mind if he comes back on Twitter. Yeah, he's going to use it to try to race bait. He's going to use it to try to subvert democracy.
Yes.
We're smarter. We're stronger.
Uh-huh.
Let's confront
Yes.
them. Let
Yes.
them come to us. Let's engage
Yes.
them. Let's talk with them, and not to troll them, but to again to try to educate them, try to illuminate them, and enlighten them. And
Yes.
I'm not afraid to back down from a fierce debate. But I've generally found that social media has done that to a lot of people. They're afraid
Yes.
to meet others that oppose their views. And
That is true.
and again, I think that that's one good thing that could come of it, which is that it could
Yes.
actually help bring us back together again, force us to talk to each other, and
Right.
and yeah, hopefully things will get better.
Thank you so much. And you have the last word. Do you have anything that you'd like to say to anybody here, to the audience, and just the people as you seek to become a great leader in this country?
Yeah, just don't get discouraged with short-term losses.
Yes.
When Trump got elected, I know a lot of people felt really demoralized, wondered where this country was headed. But I also feel that it was a lot of complacency. They elected Obama, and then everybody just felt like, oh, okay, I can go home now. No, you can't go home.
Yes. Yes.
It's you need to continue pushing. It's a never-ending struggle, and you need to constantly stay engaged. You need to constantly stay involved. You need to be in it for the long run, right? Like
Yes.
I'm not gonna if I lose in 2024, I'm not gonna get discouraged and hide
Right.
under a rock. I'm gonna come back again in 2028,
Yes.
2032, in 2036, and 24. I'm gonna keep coming and coming and coming
Yes.
until
Yes.
I die. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
you have to understand and have that long-term strategy, because if not, you're going to get very quickly exhausted, very quickly demoralized, and you're going to retract from politics,
Yes.
right? Because you don't see that immediate gratification, that immediate short-term win. So I would just say that you got to take the losses with the wins,
Yes.
and it'll make the wins much better when you get them.
Yes. Thank you so much. I'm inspired by you. I'm touched. I'm a young man that's trying to build an organization as well and a personal brand. It hasn't been easy, but I'm inspired by you. I'm inspired by what you have said, and I'm wishing you all the best. And guess what? I know that we will find other opportunities to connect. I hope, and of course, I will invite you to come back on the show. And as we grow and as we get better and bigger, and for those of us who listen to the show, thank you so much. This is the Neoliberal Corporation, serving the world today to solve tomorrow's challenges. And you can reach us at https://theneoliberal.com or RonaldoCMcKenzie.com. And you can support us at https://anchor.fm/theneoliberal/support. Thank you so much. And you will be able to view clips of this podcast as well in probably on our YouTube channels, on various feeds, and of course on various channels and podcast streams. Thank you so much, and have a great day. All right, so that is it for those who are listening by podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yes, man, and I hope you do come again and I will send a copy of it. I'm going to edit it and listen to it and edit it, and I'll send you a copy of it as well. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
And I hope we get to connect in real life.
Yeah, definitely. I'll let you know next time I'm in DC. Maybe we can grab lunch.
Yeah, man. And I believe that you are going to do well. Okay.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.